Amid the dense, shadowy embrace of the forest, a wealthy gentleman named Richard stumbled upon a young, lost girl. She appeared fragile and disoriented, her tiny frame shivering with fear and exhaustion. Compassion flooded Richard's heart as he gently lifted her and carried her to the sanctuary of his mother's home. His mother, a resilient woman, despite her disability, welcomed the child with open arms, providing her with warmth and comfort. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Later that evening, as Richard returned to his own house, a sense of unease settled over him. He felt an inexplicable urgency, compelling him to rush home without his usual courtesy of knocking. As he crossed the threshold, the sight that greeted him stopped him in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. Charles Harris, on his drive back home, was overwhelmed with fatigue after yet another grueling day at the helm of his father's company. The burden of leadership weighed heavily on him, and despite his exhaustion, his mind incessantly churned with thoughts of the business. Renowned for his unwavering dedication and professionalism, Charles was a paragon of diligence. But beyond the corporate world, he was a man of few words, enveloped in solitude. Pulling into the garage of his expansive, yet eerily silent home, Charles released a deep sigh. The emptiness of the vast house gnawed at him, a stark reminder of his loneliness. The only true bond he cherished was with his mother, Sandra, whose battle with advanced Alzheimer's had been a cruel thief of her vitality. Stepping into the dimly lit house, leaving the waning daylight behind, he called out, "Mary, I'm home." Not expecting a response from the housekeeper who usually departed hours earlier. To his surprise, Mary was still there, her expression laden with concern. "Mr. Charles, I waited for you. We need to talk about Mrs. Sandra," she said, her voice tinged with worry. Charles felt a familiar dread settle in his chest. Discussions about his mother were always fraught with anxiety. "How is she today, Mary?" he inquired, bracing himself for the worst. "She's the same, sir, but she kept asking for you today. I think it would do her good if you spent some time with her, even if she won't remember it afterward," Mary suggested gently. A pang of guilt stabbed at Charles for not being there as often as he wished. "I'll go to her now," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. As he entered Sandra's room, he saw her sitting by the window, her gaze lost in the distance, a poignant reflection of her fragmented memories. "Mom, it's me, Charles," he whispered, trying to mask the heartache he felt seeing her so frail. Sandra turned slowly, her eyes clouded with confusion, before a flicker of recognition and warmth briefly illuminated her face. "Charles," she murmured, her voice fragile yet brimming with love. "Yes, Mom, it's me," Charles replied softly, gripping her frail hand gently. "How are you feeling?" The ensuing conversation was fragmented, filled with confusion and fleeting clarity. Yet for Charles, these interactions were invaluable, bittersweet echoes of a happier past. As he left his mother's room, the burden of loneliness pressed harder against his heart. The sprawling mansion felt more like a museum of memories than a home. Charles retreated to his own room, sinking into the couch as a wave of melancholy washed over him. Despite his professional achievements, an aching void of genuine human connection gnawed at his soul. His life seemed to oscillate between the demanding realms of work and the relentless care for his ailing mother. He yearned for something more profound, yet the path to fulfillment remained elusive and obscured. After a solitary meal in the cavernous dining room, Charles decided to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the mansion. Donning a coat, he ventured into the forest that bordered the property. The mansion, with its numerous rooms and deserted corridors, felt like a prison for his restless mind. The forest, in contrast, promised solace and a chance to breathe freely. The crisp night air enveloped him, bringing a sense of tranquility as the sounds of nature replaced the mansion's stifling silence. He wandered aimlessly, his thoughts drifting through the labyrinth of his life, his mother's debilitating illness, the relentless solitude, and the insatiable need for companionship. Despite the overwhelming challenges, he savored this moment of serenity. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, guiding his steps as he trod on the path, the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional call of a nightbird, the only sounds accompanying his solitude. As he pondered the simplicity and beauty of nature, a sharp contrast to his complex and demanding life, he realized how deeply he craved basic human connection and understanding. Suddenly, a faint sound interrupted his musings. He halted, straining to identify its source. The sound was soft, almost imperceptible, a child's subdued sobs. Intrigued and concerned, Charles followed the sound until he discovered a small figure curled up beneath a tree. Approaching with gentle caution, he spoke softly, "Hey there, are you all right? Why are you out here all alone?" His voice was tender, meant to soothe and reassure the frightened child. The little girl glanced up, her eyes wide with surprise and a hint of apprehension. "I'm lost," she admitted, her voice trembling with tears. "I don't know how to get back home." Charles felt a profound surge of compassion for the child. "Don't worry, I'll help you find your way back home." "What's your name?" he asked gently, kneeling down to her level to appear less intimidating. "Barbara," she replied, sniffling and wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. He extended his hand with a warm smile. "I'm Charles. Come on, Barbara, I'll take you home." As they walked side by side along the forest path, Charles felt a peculiar sense of purpose wash over him. The immediate concern for this lost child temporarily eclipsed his own burdens. As they made their way toward a busier avenue, Charles noticed the state of Barbara's clothes. Though clean, they were simple and worn, hinting at a life starkly different from his own. "Barbara, do you know where your home is?" "Maybe a street or a neighborhood?" Charles asked, hoping for a clear direction. However, her response took him by surprise. "My home is a little cardboard house I made. It's a bit far from here, in a place where nobody else wants to be. I know where it is, but I don't quite remember how to get there," she explained, a proud sparkle in her eyes. Her innocence and pride in something as precarious as a cardboard house left Charles momentarily speechless. He struggled to process the weight of her words, realizing the gravity of her situation. Barbara didn't have a home in the traditional sense, but rather an improvised shelter, vulnerable to countless dangers. "Do you live there alone?" he asked, unable to hide the concern in his voice. "Yes, but I like it. You know, I made it all by myself. It even has a window," Barbara responded, her tone innocent and cheerful, unaware of the dire reality of her circumstances. Charles' heart ached at her words. The image of a little girl living alone in a cardboard house tugged at his very soul. Determined to ensure her safety, he said, "Barbara, I think we should find a safer place for you to stay tonight. You can stay with me and my mother until we figure out a better solution." Barbara hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Okay, thank you, Charles," she said softly. With renewed determination, Charles led Barbara back through the forest, silently vowing to help her find a better, more secure life. As they walked, the weight of his own loneliness felt lighter, replaced by a deep-seated resolve to make a difference, starting with this little girl who had stumbled into his life. Charles felt a tightness in his heart. The girl's resilience and independence were remarkable, but the thought of letting her return to such an unsafe place deeply troubled him. "Barbara, it's very cold at night, and it's already late. Would you like to spend the night at my house? Tomorrow we can visit your cardboard house and see what we can do to help," Charles suggested, trying to sound inviting without overwhelming her. The girl looked at him with a mix of suspicion and hope. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to be a bother," she said timidly. Charles nodded with a gentle smile. "I'm sure, Barbara. Come on." It will be an adventure. As they approached the mansion, Barbara's eyes widened in awe, and with a wondrous smile she exclaimed, "Wow, this place looks like a fairy tale castle." Charles couldn't help but smile, genuinely touched by her excitement. It had been a long time since he had witnessed such unbridled joy and admiration. Leading Barbara through the grand entrance, he approached Mary, the housekeeper, hoping she could assist with the unexpected situation. Mary, always serious and professional, raised her eyebrows in surprise at the sight of the girl beside Charles. "Mr. Charles, what is this? Who is this child?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Charles quickly explained the situation, hoping for understanding and support. However, Mary's reaction was not what he had anticipated. "You can't just bring a stranger into the house, sir. She could have diseases. It could be dangerous for all of us, especially for your mother." Mary reprimanded, clearly worried about the implications of Charles's decision. Mary's response surprised and irritated Charles. He wasn't used to being challenged in his own home, especially when it came to helping someone in need. "Mary, I expected more understanding from you. Barbara is just a child who needs help. We're not going to turn our backs on her." Charles responded firmly. The discussion briefly intensified, with Mary emphasizing the risks and Charles stressing the need for compassion. Finally, Charles put an end to the conversation. "I've decided, Mary. You will get some clean clothes for Barbara, prepare a warm bath for her, and ensure she has a decent meal tonight," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for further argument. Mary, clearly displeased, nodded reluctantly. "As you wish, sir," she said begrudgingly. Barbara stood quietly, watching the exchange with wide eyes. Charles turned to her and smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, Barbara. Everything will be all right." Mary, though disgruntled, followed Charles' instructions. She prepared a warm bath for Barbara, and as the little girl soaked in the comforting water, the weight of her days of wandering seemed to wash away. Afterward, dressed in clean clothes that were a bit too big for her, Barbara sat at the dining table, where a hearty meal was laid out. As Barbara ate with gusto, Charles felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The mansion, usually cold and empty, seemed to come alive with the presence of this small, grateful guest. He watched as Barbara's eyes lit up with each bite, her innocence and joy bringing a warmth to his heart that he hadn't felt in years. After dinner, Charles showed Barbara to a guest room, its grandeur almost overwhelming to her. "You can sleep here tonight, Barbara. If you need anything, my room is just down the hall," he said, pointing to his door. "Thank you, Mr. Charles," she whispered, her eyes wide with gratitude. As Charles left her room, he felt a mix of emotions. The loneliness that had haunted him seemed to recede, replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. For the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful about the future, determined to make a difference in the life of this little girl who had unexpectedly entered his world. Although it was rare for Charles to assert his will in this way, he knew he couldn't, in good conscience, do any less for Barbara. The housekeeper withdrew to carry out the orders, and Charles turned his attention back to the girl, who watched the interaction with a mix of confusion and admiration. Charles knelt beside Barbara, offering her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, we'll take care of you," he said, trying to ease any lingering fear or concern. Barbara, still awed by the grandeur of the house, smiled back, an expression of gratitude and relief washing over her face. In that moment, Charles felt a deep certainty in his heart. Despite the challenges he faced, helping Barbara was undeniably the right decision. Shortly after, Barbara was shown to her temporary room, which seemed like a palace in her eyes. She jumped onto the soft bed, touching the pillows and exploring every corner with the boundless curiosity and joy only a child possesses. "It's bigger than my cardboard house," she exclaimed, laughing as she ran from one side to the other, marveling at the room's splendor. After a warm bath that washed away the cold and discomfort from her little bones, Barbara donned the clean, comfortable clothes Mary had laid out for her. Though simple, they felt to her like the finest garments. Sitting on the bed, she eagerly devoured the meal that had been prepared for her, each bite a testament to her appreciation and gratitude. When Charles returned to check on her, he found Barbara lying down, her eyes sparkling with happiness and contentment. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, feeling a wave of satisfaction at the sight of her transformation. "Yes, everything is so beautiful and tasty." "Thank you so much, Mr. Charles," she replied with a sincerity that warmed his heart. "You don't need to call me Sir, Barbara. Just Charles is fine," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. The girl nodded, a bit shy now that the reality of her situation began to settle in. "Charles, can I ask you something? Is this house a real castle?" Her childlike curiosity shone brightly in her eyes. Charles chuckled, delighted by her question. "Not exactly a castle, but it's my home, and tonight it's your home too." He realized how much he enjoyed having someone to share his large and lonely house with, even if just for one night. "Would you like me to read you a bedtime story?" he offered, hoping to make her night even more special. Barbara's eyes lit up with excitement. "I would love that," she exclaimed, settling in among the covers. Charles picked a book from the bedroom shelf and began to read, his voice gentle and soothing, filling the room with warmth and comfort. Barbara listened intently, her eyes gradually growing heavy until she drifted off to sleep, a peaceful smile on her face. As Charles closed the book and quietly left the room, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The house, usually so cold and empty, seemed to come alive with Barbara's presence. He realized that, for the first time in a long while, he had found a sense of purpose and connection. Helping Barbara had not only given her a safe haven for the night, but had also brought a new warmth and meaning into his own life. At dawn, the sunlight flooding the room gently roused Barbara from a deep and comfortable sleep, the most restful she had ever experienced in her short life. The tranquility of the morning was abruptly broken by the voice of the housekeeper, Mary, who brusquely opened the curtains and announced it was time to get up. "Quick, girl, time for breakfast," she commanded in a tone that brooked no dissent. Still drowsy, Barbara rubbed her eyes and sleepily inquired about Charles. "He's already left for work and won't be back until late," Mary replied curtly, offering no further comfort or explanation. Barbara's disappointment was palpable. She had hoped to see Charles in the morning, perhaps to share breakfast with him like a small, makeshift family. But recognizing the futility of arguing with Mary, she forced herself to get up and prepare for the day. Slowly but obediently, Barbara got out of bed, her thoughts lingering on Charles and the kindness he had shown her. She brushed her teeth and dressed herself, feeling a bit awkward and still unaccustomed to the mansion's luxury and formality. Mary waited impatiently to take her to breakfast, a daily ritual that Barbara had never experienced before. Seated at the breakfast table, Barbara marveled at the variety and abundance of food, so different from her routine of scarcity. However, Mary's presence made the meal less enjoyable. The housekeeper, maintaining her cold demeanor, instructed Barbara, "Do not leave this room under any circumstances." "I don't have time to watch children," she warned, making it clear that disobedience would not be tolerated. Barbara nodded, pretending to agree with Mary's instructions. However, in her heart, she was already planning to explore the mansion as soon as she had the chance. Her curiosity and desire for adventure were too strong to be contained by stern orders. She imagined the secrets the grand house might hold, the corners and nooks still unknown to her. After breakfast, Mary escorted Barbara back to her room. At that moment, Barbara felt a mix of excitement and nervousness at the prospect of defying the rules. She knew she could get into trouble if caught, but the allure of adventure called to her, and the possibility of discovering more about Charles's world was irresistible. As soon as the door closed behind Mary, Barbara began plotting her next move. With her heart beating a little faster, she pressed her ear against the door, listening intently to the sounds of the waking house. The distant sound of Mary's footsteps retreating down the hallway emboldened her. She waited a few moments, ensuring the housekeeper was far enough away, then, with a sigh of determination, silently opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Charles's mansion was a labyrinth of wonders to Barbara. Each corridor, each open door revealed something new and exciting. She explored with wide eyes, her curiosity guiding each step. She opened drawers filled with mysterious objects and relics from a bygone era. She peered inside enormous vases that seemed capable of hiding secrets. The paintings on the walls depicted generations past, their eyes seemingly following Barbara as she moved through the halls. She wondered about the people in the paintings, imagining their lives and adventures. Each room she explored seemed to whisper ancient stories, filling her mind with questions and marvels. Barbara's journey through the mansion was one of endless discovery. She found herself in a grand library, its shelves lined with books of all sizes and ages. She ran her fingers along the spines, feeling the textures of leather and cloth, wondering about the stories contained within. In another room, she discovered an ornate music box, its delicate melodies enchanting her as she turned the crank. She uncovered hidden nooks and crannies, secret alcoves that seemed to be waiting for her to find them. As the morning sun climbed higher, Barbara's adventure continued. She stumbled upon a room filled with antique toys, their intricate designs capturing her imagination. She played with them, losing herself in a world of make-believe. She imagined herself as a princess in the grand mansion, embarking on brave quests and discovering hidden treasures. In every corner of the mansion, Barbara found something to captivate her. The house, once intimidating and vast, became a place of endless possibilities. She felt a sense of belonging and excitement she had never known before. With each discovery, her bond with Charles's world grew stronger, and she felt a glimmer of hope for the future. As Barbara continued her exploration, she couldn't help but wonder about Charles. She hoped he would return soon, eager to share her newfound adventures with him. She wanted to tell him about the hidden rooms, the treasure she had found, and the stories she had imagined. For the first time in a long while, Barbara felt a sense of joy and anticipation, knowing that she was part of something bigger, something wonderful. During her exploration, Barbara discovered a slightly open door leading to Sandra's room. Driven by a mix of curiosity and hesitation, she entered to find the elderly lady seated in an armchair, her gaze distant and unfocused. "Hello," Barbara said kindly as she approached. Sandra turned her head toward the voice, but her eyes held no recognition or understanding. Determined to start a conversation, Barbara continued, "I'm Barbara. I'm a friend of Charles's." Yet Sandra remained silent, her mind lost in the labyrinth of inaccessible memories. Undeterred, Barbara sat beside her, sharing stories of the forest, her cardboard house, and how Charles had found her. Despite the lack of response, Barbara sensed a strange connection, as if her words somehow offered a measure of comfort to the elderly woman. However, restlessness soon crept over Barbara again. The tranquility of the room was cozy, but her youthful curiosity wouldn't allow her to remain still for long. She turned her attention to the surroundings, eager to uncover more of the room's secrets. The drawers and dressers yielded little beyond everyday objects and some dusty treasures, relics of a bygone era that didn't speak to her. Yet none of this quenched her thirst for adventure. Her eyes eventually landed on a massive wardrobe at the far end of the room, a piece of furniture that seemed to promise secrets hidden within its intricately carved wood. With hesitant hands, Barbara opened one of its doors, revealing an interior that felt like a treasure trove. Inside, a guitar lay, hinting at forgotten melodies, but it was a very old notebook that completely captured her attention. Carefully, she took the notebook from its hiding place, feeling the weight of history in her hands. The time-yellowed pages seemed to whisper stories that awaited rediscovery. Barbara gently opened the notebook, her eyes widening with wonder as she scanned the pages. Each page was filled with handwritten notes, sketches, and photographs, fragments of a lifelong past. The notebook told the story of Sandra's younger years, her dreams, and her love for music and art. It contained pressed flowers, letters, and diary entries that painted a picture of a vibrant and passionate woman. Engrossed, Barbara forgot her initial nervousness and began reading aloud, hoping the words might spark a memory in Sandra. "Dear Diary, today I met the most wonderful man. His name is Henry, and he has the kindest eyes." Barbara read, her voice soft and melodic. For a brief moment, Sandra's eyes flickered with a spark of recognition, a fleeting connection to the past. Barbara continued, feeling encouraged. "Henry and I spent the afternoon by the lake, talking about our dreams. I hope this is the beginning of something beautiful." Though Sandra's response was minimal, Barbara could see the glimmers of emotion in her eyes. She felt a profound sense of purpose, as if she were unearthing precious memories and giving them back to Sandra, even if just for a moment. Barbara's curiosity drove her to explore further. She flipped through the pages, discovering poems, drawings, and photographs of a young Sandra and her beloved Henry. Each page revealed more about Sandra's rich and emotional life. Barbara's heart swelled with empathy and admiration for the woman who had once lived so fully. Finally, as the morning sunlight streamed through the windows, Barbara closed the notebook and placed it gently back in the wardrobe. She turned to Sandra, who had been quietly listening, and said, "Thank you for sharing your stories with me, Sandra. I feel like I know you so much better now." Sandra's eyes softened, and though she didn't speak, Barbara felt a silent understanding pass between them. She leaned in and gave Sandra's hand a gentle squeeze before quietly leaving the room. With renewed determination and a heart full of newfound empathy, Barbara continued her exploration of the mansion, eager to discover more about the world Charles and Sandra inhabited. Each step she took, each discovery she made, brought her closer to understanding the profound connection that tied them all together. However, the moment of discovery was abruptly interrupted by Mary's voice in the hallway. Barbara's heart raced, and instinctively she hid the notebook under her clothes, fearing the housekeeper might take this new treasure from her. When Mary entered the room and saw her, the reprimand was immediate. "Barbara, what are you doing here?" "I told you to stay in your room," Mary exclaimed, irritation evident in her voice. The housekeeper's authority filled the space, making Barbara shrink back, guilt and fear evident in her look. "I was just looking," she murmured, knowing there was no excuse good enough to justify her disobedience. Sternly, Mary forced Barbara to return to her room, repeating that she was not to explore the house. "It's not safe, and you should not touch things that aren't yours," Mary warned as she escorted Barbara back to her room. The adventure had ended for now, but the notebook hidden under her clothes was a secret Barbara kept to herself, a piece of mystery she was determined to unravel. Back in the safety of her temporary room, Barbara sat on the bed, the old notebook now a treasure all her own, hidden from Mary's sight and scolding. With her heart still racing from the recent adventure and discovery, she carefully opened the notebook, the pages whispering promises of ancient secrets. As she read, a world unfolded before her, a realm of memories preserved against the relentless advance of oblivion. It was evident that the notebook served as a place of records for Sandra, a desperate attempt to cling to memories that Alzheimer's disease destroyed, a condition Sandra also mentioned in the diary in a sad and desperate manner. As Barbara leafed through the pages, she uncovered another fact about Sandra, her passion for music. Among the personal memories and reflections, there were song lyrics and melodies noted down, sketches of an artistic soul trying to express itself through art. Sandra was not just a mother and a woman battling a terrible disease, she was a composer whose emotions and thoughts found an outlet in music. Then Barbara found a dedication to her son, a song that Sandra had composed especially for Charles. The lyrics of the song were simple but deeply moving. "In your eyes I find my light, like a star that shines in the sky. Your smile is my peace, it's the luck that life brings me. You grow so much, my little one, but in my heart I always keep you, and with love I wrap you in my arms and love you without fear of loving. My little bird, fly far away. Fly high and far. Go live, for even from afar, I keep you forever, and through these notes, I will reach you. After finishing reading the lyrics, Barbara closed the notebook, deeply moved by the discovery. The song was not just a mother's tribute to her son, it was a reminder of what Sandra once was, of her love for her son and her passion for art. Yet all these characteristics that once were part of the lady were now simply forgotten. At that moment, Barbara knew she had found something truly special. She decided that somehow she needed to help, but chose to wait and think about what she could do to achieve this goal. With that resolution, night approached, and Charles returned from work. Happy to reunite with the girl, he suggested a walk through the forest, an attempt to reconnect with the peace they had found together the night before. For Barbara, this was the perfect opportunity to bring up the subject that now occupied all her thoughts. Walking side by side through the forest, Barbara gathered the courage to touch on the subject delicately. Charles misses. Sandra, she was a composer, wasn't she? Her voice was soft, trying to seem casual, but her intertwined hands betrayed her anxiety for the response. Charles looked at Barbara, surprised by the question. For a moment he pondered how she could know about that. Yes, she was an incredible composer. She wrote really beautiful music. But how did you come to know about this? He asked, with a hint of curiosity in his voice. Oh, I saw a guitar in her room when I got lost in the house. It was completely accidental. I swear by my breakfast, Barbara stammered over her words, the lie coming out more complicated than she expected. I like music, she added quickly, hoping to divert any suspicion. Charles smiled, the tension in his shoulders relaxing. She loved to play. Composing was her way of expressing love, joy, sadness, everything. She even composed a song for me when I was little. It went something like this. The memory seemed to bring back a simpler time, a time of warmth and unconditional love. Charles began to hum the melody his mother had composed especially for him. The music was soft, a song that spoke of eternal and unconditional love, of hope and protection. Charles's voice, though hesitant at first, gained strength, filled with emotion and nostalgia. Barbara listened in silence, the beauty of the music warming her heart. Through the melody, she felt as if she was touching a piece of Sandra's soul, now shared with her. With this emotion, she felt driven to reveal a bit more about herself. I can play the guitar too, you know. I've always really liked music as well, she said, a glint of pride in her eyes. The pleasant surprise made Charles look at her with newfound admiration. Really? And how did you learn? You're so young to know an instrument. You must be very smart to learn so quickly. Barbara smiled, a bit sad and proud at the same time. My dad taught me. He taught me many things, to read, to play, to be strong, she began, her voice carrying a mix of gratitude and melancholy. Charles noticed the depth of the connection Barbara had with the memories of her father, a relationship marked by love and loss. Intrigued and moved by her story, Charles asked more. And your mother, did she also teach you many things? Barbara looked down, collecting her memories before answering. My dad said she traveled to heaven after I was born. The angels needed her there. I don't know why, but she never came back, she explained simply, repeating the comforting words her father had told her. After my dad got sick with a heart condition, he also had to go. He left me alone. The neighbors took care of me for a while after he left, but I knew I had to fend for myself. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. Barbara's words deeply touched Charles, revealing a life marked by challenges that no child should face. Yet her strength shone through her story, a light of hope and resilience that defied the shadows of the past. Barbara, your courage is admirable. I'm so sorry for everything you've gone through, but now you're here, and you're not alone anymore, Charles said, offering not just his support but also the comfort of a new family. The conversation between them, though filled with emotions and painful revelations, created an even stronger bond. Barbara, for the first time in a long while, felt welcomed and safe, knowing that with Charles, she could find a new beginning. And Charles, impacted by Barbara's strength and life story, found a new determination to offer her a better future, a silent promise of protection and care he vowed to fulfill. After a tranquil walk in the forest, which served both to soothe their emotions and to strengthen their bond, Charles led Barbara back to the mansion. His spirit, though weighed down with reflections, felt lighter in the girl's presence. He carefully prepared Barbara for bed, ensuring she felt comfortable and secure in her new temporary reality. As he watched her fall asleep, a sense of paternal protection blossomed within him, a deep desire to provide everything life had denied her so far. Leaving Barbara's room, his steps were resolute, driven by a newly formed decision in his heart. Finding Mary in the hallway, Charles couldn't contain the urgency he felt. "Mary, I've been thinking about something very serious. I want to officially adopt Barbara," he declared, his resolve unmistakable. Mary, ever pragmatic and somewhat skeptical, received the news with a mix of surprise and disapproval. "Adopt the girl, Charles? Are you sure? That's a huge responsibility, and with everything you already have to manage, I don't know if you're ready for it." She hesitated, concerned not only about the implications but also about Charles's capacity to take on such a commitment. Charles, however, was unfazed by Mary's doubts. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life," he responded, determination gleaming in his eyes. "Barbara has shown me what's been missing in my life. I can give her a family, a home, and honestly, I think she has a lot to offer me too." Mary scrutinized Charles, searching for any sign of hesitation, any reason to question his resolve. But what she saw was a man transformed by the presence of a child, someone willing to radically alter his life for her. "Charles, I just want you to think it through. Adoption isn't something you do on a whim. You need to be prepared for everything, the joys and the challenges it brings." Charles nodded, acknowledging Mary's concerns, but his decision was unwavering. "I know it will be a challenge, but I'm ready. I will do whatever it takes. Barbara deserves a chance for a better life, and I want to be part of that." The conviction in his voice was unmistakable, and Mary recognized the sincerity of his intention. The next day, unexpectedly, the certainty of this decision was reinforced by a peculiar event. During breakfast, while Mary served the meal in her usual silent manner, Barbara seized the opportunity to bring up a hopeful yet delicate topic. "Mary, do you think there's any way to make Mrs. Sandra remember things again?" Barbara asked, her innocence mingling with a stubborn hope. The question caught Mary off guard, making her pause. She sighed, the gravity of the situation evident in her expression as she responded. "Dear Mrs. Sandra's illness is something that can't be cured. She has Alzheimer's, and it's been getting worse over time. It's not something we can reverse." Mary explained, trying to be honest without fostering false hopes in the girl. Barbara's face fell, but she didn't give up. "But there must be something we can do to help her feel better, right?" she insisted, her determination shining through. Mary softened slightly, moved by Barbara's earnestness. "We can do things to make her comfortable and happy, even if just for a moment. Sometimes, just being there, talking to her, and sharing stories can bring her some peace." Barbara nodded thoughtfully, a new resolve forming within her. "I'll do my best to make her happy," she promised. Mary, touched by Barbara's spirit, gave a small smile. "That's very kind of you, Barbara. I'm sure your company means a lot to her." As the day went on, Barbara spent more time with Sandra, sharing stories and showing her the drawings she had made. Although Sandra's responses were limited, there were moments of fleeting recognition that filled Barbara with hope. Meanwhile, Charles contacted a lawyer to discuss the adoption process. His heart swelled with purpose as he took the first steps toward making Barbara a permanent part of his life. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready for the journey ahead. The mansion, once a symbol of his isolation, now felt like a home filled with potential and new beginnings. Barbara absorbed the explanation with an unusual seriousness for her age, but the determination in her eyes did not waver. "But there must be something we can do to help, even if it's just a little," she insisted, unwilling to accept that there was no hope for the grandmother she never had. Mary watched Barbara, admiring the girl's willpower. Despite knowing the harsh reality of Sandra's disease, Barbara's faith was contagious. Well, they say that music and old memories can sometimes reach parts of the mind that we think are lost, but it's not guaranteed. Encouraged by Mary's words, Barbara began to formulate a plan. She remembered Sandra's music notebook and the song Charles had hummed the night before. Maybe, she thought, music was the key to unlocking Sandra's dormant memories. "I'll try with music then. Who knows, it might help a little," Barbara concluded, her resolve firm. Driven by her new mission, Barbara managed, with her childlike determination, to convince Mary to allow her to spend the day with Sandra. Armed with a mix of hope and a plan, she entered the room where Sandra spent most of her days, a silent sanctuary of faded memories. Initially, Barbara tried to establish a conversation with Sandra, talking about the day and small things she hoped might spark some kind of reaction. However, her initial attempts resulted in a one-sided conversation, with Sandra remaining in her usual position in her armchair, immobile, and her gaze lost in some distant point. Undiscouraged by the lack of response, Barbara proceeded with her plan, shifting the focus of the conversation to something she believed was close to Sandra's heart music. "Mrs. Sandra, I saw a notebook in your room. It was filled with songs you composed, wasn't it? They're so beautiful." Barbara spoke, her voice full of admiration. "Do you remember when you wrote them?" She talked about the songs with enthusiasm, describing the lyrics she had read and the melodies that Charles had shared with her, hoping that the mention of her past passions could ignite a spark of recognition in Sandra's eyes. For a while, there was no visible change in Sandra's demeanor. Barbara began to feel the weight of frustration, but she pressed on, her voice unwavering. She decided to take it a step further. She retrieved the guitar from the wardrobe and, though she had never played before, she plucked a few strings, creating a hesitant melody. "Mrs. Sandra, I'm going to play one of your songs. Charles taught me a little bit," she said, her voice trembling slightly with both nerves and excitement. She began to hum a tune, a soft and gentle melody that Charles had shown her, hoping it would trigger a memory. As the tentative notes filled the room, something remarkable happened. Sandra's fingers twitched slightly, and her gaze, though still distant, seemed to shift slightly, as if searching for the source of the sound. Encouraged, Barbara continued, her voice growing steadier. "Mrs. Sandra, this is one of your songs. Charles told me you used to sing it to him when he was a little boy," Barbara said, her voice filled with emotion. "He loves it so much, and now I do too." Sandra's eyes seemed to clear momentarily, and she whispered, "Henry." Barbara's heart leaped at the sound. "Yes, Mrs. Sandra, it's about Henry. You wrote it for him, didn't you?" Tears welled in Sandra's eyes, and she murmured, "Henry ... my love." Barbara felt a surge of hope. "Tell me more about him, Mrs. Sandra. What was he like?" With a trembling voice, Sandra began to speak, haltingly at first, but with growing strength. "He was ... kind ... and he loved music. We ... would sit by the lake ... and sing together. Those were the happiest days." Barbara listened intently, her heart swelling with joy and empathy. She had managed to break through the fog of Sandra's illness, if only for a moment, and had brought back a fragment of her past. As Sandra continued to reminisce, her words flowed more freely, painting a picture of a life filled with love and music. Barbara stayed by her side, listening and occasionally prompting her with gentle questions. The connection between them grew stronger, and for that day the room was filled with the warmth of shared memories and the healing power of music. When Charles returned home late that evening, he found Barbara and Sandra sitting together, the guitar resting beside them. Sandra's eyes were brighter than he had seen in a long time, and Barbara's face was lit with a mixture of triumph and contentment. "Charles," Sandra said softly, "Barbara has been telling me stories and playing music. It's been ... wonderful." Charles felt a lump in his throat as he witnessed the bond forming between the two. "I'm so glad," Mom, he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Barbara has a special gift." Barbara beamed, feeling a sense of belonging and purpose she had never known before. She had not only found a new home, but also a family that needed her as much as she needed them. That night, as she prepared for bed, Charles tucked her in, his heart overflowing with gratitude. "Thank you, Barbara," he whispered. "You've brought so much joy to this house." Barbara smiled sleepily. "Good night, Charles. Thank you for everything." As she drifted off to sleep, Charles sat by her bedside, reflecting on the unexpected turn his life had taken. He had started the day with a plan to adopt Barbara, but now he realized that she had already become an irreplaceable part of their family. The mansion, once a place of solitude and memories, was now filled with the laughter and love of a new beginning. "The song you made for Charles, I heard him sing it. It's so beautiful. It speaks of love and hope," continued Barbara, trying to reach Sandra's soul through her words. Despite her persistent attempts, Sandra's reaction remained unchanged, her expression distant, as if she were in a world apart, far from Barbara's reach. The girl, however, did not allow the lack of response to shake her. She understood that even without a visible change, these moments of sharing could be important. Determined, she decided she would try to find other ways, convinced that the music and the love it represented had the power to cross the barriers imposed by the disease. Then she had another idea. She went to her room to fetch Sandra's diary and returned to the ladies' room with it in hand, believing that perhaps seeing her own lyrics and melodies, Sandra might find a way back to the memories the disease was stealing from her. Carefully, she opened the notebook. "Look, Mrs." Sandra said, Barbara, holding the notebook so that Sandra could see the writings. "These are your songs. Do you remember writing them? They are very beautiful. I really like them." Her voice full of hope, she began to recite the verses of the songs. But despite the emotion Barbara put into each verse, Sandra's reaction was the same as before. None. She remained still, her distant gaze seeming to look through the notebook, through the walls of the room, to a place only she knew. The lack of response did not diminish Barbara's spirit. Instead, it fueled her determination to find something more, something that could touch Sandra's heart in a way that words alone could not. With that thought, Barbara headed again to the large wardrobe in Sandra's room, exploring its interior once more. Her eyes lit up upon discovering a box full of musical score notebooks right next to the guitar. It was a hidden treasure, the keys to the melodies that accompanied the lyrics she had read. Barbara picked up one of the notebooks, flipping through the pages filled with musical notes. Each page was a promise of sound, a potential bridge to Sandra's dormant consciousness. This might work, thought Barbara, a plan forming in her mind. If words couldn't reach Sandra, perhaps the music itself, in its purest form, could. Excited by the possibility, Barbara decided it was time to put her plan into action. With the notebooks in hand, she began to compare the titles of the songs in the scores with those in Sandra's diary. When she finally found matches, a mix of anxiety and excitement took over her. With Sandra's guitar, she tried to play and sing the songs, hoping that the combination of melody and lyrics could awaken some memory in Sandra's mind. Barbara strummed the guitar tentatively at first, but her confidence grew as she found the right chords. She began to sing one of Sandra's songs, her young voice carrying the melody through the room. "In the light of dawn, we danced with dreams," she sang, pouring all her heart into the words. For a while, There was no change, and Barbara's hopes wavered. But she kept playing, kept singing, believing in the power of music. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Sandra's eyes began to focus. The distant look in her eyes softened, and her fingers twitched slightly on the armrest of her chair. Barbara noticed the change and continued with renewed energy. Our hearts intertwined. A timeless theme, the melody flowed, filling the room with a sense of warmth and nostalgia. Sandra's lips moved faintly, as if trying to form the words. Tears welled in her eyes, and she whispered, "Henry, our song." Barbara's heart leaped with joy. "Yes, Mrs. Sandra, your song with Henry." "Do you remember?" she encouraged, her voice trembling with excitement. Sandra's eyes locked onto Barbara's, and for the first time in what felt like ages, there was a flicker of recognition. "We sang by the lake. Every morning," Sandra said, her voice filled with a mixture of sorrow and joy. Barbara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, you did, and the songs are still here in your heart. They never left." Sandra reached out a trembling hand, and Barbara took it gently. They sat together, the music weaving a bridge between past and present, healing wounds that time had inflicted. For that moment, the disease that had taken so much from Sandra seemed to retreat, allowing her to connect with the memories and the love that still resided within her. As the song ended, Sandra sighed contentedly. "Thank you, Barbara. You brought me back, if only for a little while." Barbara squeezed Sandra's hand. "I'm so happy you're here with me. We'll keep singing, and we'll keep remembering." Charles, who had quietly entered the room and witnessed the scene, felt a swell of pride and gratitude. He approached and knelt beside them, placing a hand on Barbara's shoulder. "Thank you, Barbara. You've given us both a precious gift." Barbara smiled up at him, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "We're a family now, Charles. We'll always have each other." The three of them sat together, the bonds of love and music intertwining their hearts, creating a new harmony that would carry them through the challenges ahead. In that moment, they were not just surviving, they were living, connected by the power of shared memories and the promise of new ones to come. Despite her efforts and the melody flowing from her fingers with increasing confidence, Sandra's reaction remained unchanged. None. Barbara realized that her unfamiliarity with the exact way to sing Sandra's songs might be preventing the connection she so desperately sought. But she did not let herself be discouraged. She persisted, trying different songs, adjusting her voice to match the guitar's melody as best as she could. The day turned into the afternoon, during which she took a brief break for lunch, only to return and continue. As evening fell, Barbara's determination did not waver. Her fingers began to hurt, and her throat grew dry, but her spirit refused to give in to discouragement. Each chord she played was a silent plea for Sandra to return, even if just for a moment, to the land that music had created. As night descended, Barbara finally had to pause, her fingers sore and her heart heavy with frustration. Despite her tireless attempts, she had not elicited the reaction she so desired from Sandra. Sitting silently on the floor, she let the guitar rest. Exhaustion and disillusionment began to set in. But amidst the quiet, a flash of inspiration struck her. The melody that Charles had shared with her in the forest, the song his mother had composed especially for him, resurfaced in her mind as a beacon of hope. It was the one song where she knew the exact rhythm and singing. With renewed determination, Barbara sifted through the scores, eagerly searching for the music. Finally, among the sheets of paper yellowed by time, she found the precious score. The notes of the music dedicated to Charles danced before her eyes. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of nervousness and hope, and positioned her fingers on the guitar. Carefully, she began to play the first notes. The melody flowed more easily this time, each chord echoing in the room with an emotional depth she hoped would reach Sandra's heart. Then, with a clear voice, she began to sing the verses she had memorized. As the music filled the room, a different sparkle appeared in Sandra's eyes. For an instant, the fog that seemed to envelop her mind dissipated. She slowly turned her head toward Barbara, as if waking from a long dream. Sandra's eyes fixed on the girl, a fleeting recognition crossing her gaze. Barbara's heart raced with hope. She continued to sing, her voice filled with emotion, pouring all her love and longing into each note. In the garden of dreams, we danced through the night, your hand in mine. Everything felt right, she sang, her eyes never leaving Sandra's. Sandra's lips parted slightly, and she whispered, "Charles, my sweet boy." Tears welled in Barbara's eyes. "Yes, Mrs. Sandra, Charles loves you so much. This is your song for him," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. Sandra's eyes filled with tears as she reached out a trembling hand toward Barbara. "My song. For Charles," she repeated, her voice choked with emotion. Barbara gently took Sandra's hand, holding it tightly. "Yes, Mrs. Sandra, it's your beautiful song. Charles told me how much it means to him." For a moment, the barrier between Sandra's present and her memories seemed to fade. She squeezed Barbara's hand, her gaze clear and focused. "Tell him. I love him," she said, her voice filled with a depth of feeling that transcended the confines of her illness. "I will, Mrs. Sandra." "I promise," Barbara replied, tears streaming down her face. As the song ended, Sandra sighed deeply, a look of peace settling over her features. Barbara stayed by her side, holding her hand, feeling the profound connection they had forged through music and love. When Charles returned home late that evening, he found Barbara and Sandra sitting together, the guitar resting beside them. Sandra's eyes were brighter than he had seen in a long time, and Barbara's face was illuminated with a mixture of triumph and contentment. "Charles," Sandra said softly, "Barbara played our song. It brought me back, if only for a little while." Charles felt a lump in his throat as he knelt beside them, placing a hand on Barbara's shoulder. "Thank you, Barbara. You've given us both a precious gift," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Barbara smiled up at him, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "We're a family now, Charles. We'll always have each other." The three of them sat together, the bonds of love and music intertwining their hearts, creating a new harmony that would carry them through the challenges ahead. In that moment, they were not just surviving, they were living, connected by the power of shared memories and the promise of new ones to come. While this scene unfolded, Charles was returning home after an exhausting day of work, his thoughts focused on Barbara and the small joys her presence had brought to the mansion. Upon arrival, his first instinct was to look for her. Her absence from her room sparked a pang of concern, and he hurried in search of answers. He went to Mary, anxiety etched on his expression, seeking information about the girl. "Mary, have you seen Barbara? She's not in her room." Mary, who was tidying some objects, turned to him with a calm expression. "She's in Mrs. Sandra's room. She spent the entire day there trying to help the lady recover," she replied, a glint of approval in her eyes. "Recover? What do you mean?" Curiosity and concern mingled in Charles's question. The idea of Barbara alone with Sandra all day left him both worried and intrigued. Mary sighed, choosing her words carefully. "She spent the whole day playing the guitar and singing songs to her. She probably saw the diary and the scores of your mother and decided to sing. It's a beautiful thing to see. Come, I'll show you." The housekeeper indicated the way, leading him down the hallway toward Sandra's room. As they walked, Charles felt a mix of anxiety and hope. The possibility that Barbara had found a way to reach his mother, who had been closed off in her own world for years, seemed almost miraculous. "Mary, did it really work? Did my mother react in any way?" he asked, his voice tinged with trepidation. Mary gave him a serious look. "Not that I know of. The last time I checked on the two, Mrs. Sandra remained the same as always, but what matters is the girl's intention. A slight discouragement from the lack of expectation made Charles sigh, but before they even reached the door, a soft melody and two voices in harmony reached his ears. Charles stopped immediately, recognizing his mother's voice in a song he never expected to hear again. His heart raced, pulsing with a mix of surprise, hope, and a deep emotion he couldn't name. Driven by strong hope, Charles rushed down the rest of the hallway, guided by the sound that seemed to call for him. As he approached the room, the sight that met his eyes took his breath away. There, sitting beside Sandra, was Barbara, holding the guitar and singing with her. Sandra's eyes were clear, her expression focused and present, as she sang along with Barbara. It was a moment Charles had longed for but never dared to hope for. "Mom," he whispered, stepping into the room, his voice thick with emotion. Sandra looked up, her eyes locking onto Charles with a recognition that brought tears to his eyes. "Charles, my dear boy," she said, her voice filled with love and clarity. Barbara continued to play softly, her eyes shining with triumph and joy. "Charles, I played your song for her," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. It brought her back. Charles knelt beside them, taking his mother's hand in his. "Mom, I've missed you so much," he said, tears streaming down his face. Sandra squeezed his hand gently. "I know, Charles, I know. Thank you for bringing Barbara into our lives. She's a miracle." Barbara blushed, her heart swelling with happiness. "I'm just glad I could help." The three of them sat together, the room filled with the music of love and reunion. Charles felt a deep sense of gratitude and wonder, knowing that Barbara had brought his family back together. The mansion, once a place of sorrow and isolation, was now filled with the light of hope and the promise of new beginnings. As the evening turned into night, Charles knew that this was just the beginning. With Barbara by their side, they would face the future with courage and love, ready to create new memories and cherish the moments they had been given. The power of music and the strength of their bond had shown them that even in the darkest times, there was always a way to find the light. Upon reaching the room's door, Charles encountered a scene he never thought possible: his mother, Sandra, singing along with Barbara, united by the music he had shared in the forest. The song his mother had composed for him in a distant past now served as a link between generations, bridging memory and the present. Tears began to freely run down Charles's face, each drop carrying years of longing, love, and the pain of loss. Seeing his mother awake and participating in the world once more, even if only for a brief moment, brought immense relief and indescribable joy. Barbara's presence, the key that had unlocked this door to the past, reinforced in his heart the decision to make her part of his family. He remained at the door, watching the scene, the music filling his heart. When the last notes of the song echoed through the room, the silence that followed carried a wave of emotions. Sandra, with a glint of lucidity that had not been seen in her eyes for a long time, turned towards Charles. The smile she offered him was a rare gift of recognition and affection. "Charles, my dear, stop crying. You look as if you've been pinched," she said, her voice fragile but incredibly clear. Sandra's words, as unexpected as they were precious, only intensified Charles's crying. He smiled through the tears, a smile that carried years of repressed pain, love, and longing. Unable to contain the emotion overflowing within him, he ran to hug his mother, enveloping her in an embrace that symbolized both loss and reunion. Barbara, though not fully understanding the depth of the suffering and joy Charles was experiencing, found herself moved by the tears he shed. The young girl, who had spent so much time seeking her own connection with a lost past and family, found herself crying alongside them, touched by the intensity of the shared moment. Mary, in turn, tried to disguise her own tears, but the emotion of the reunion shook her heart as much as it did the others. That brief moment of clarity was an unexpected gift for Charles, a glimmer of hope amidst his mother's illness. However, like all precious things, Sandra's lucidity was not everlasting. Charles watched with a mix of gratitude and sadness as the light in her eyes slowly dissipated and she returned to the silence and distance that had marked her existence in recent years. Before leaving her, he tenderly kissed his mother's forehead, a gesture of farewell to that moment of connection, laden with a depth of emotion that words could not capture. Turning to Barbara, he knelt down and embraced her tightly. "Thank you, Barbara. You gave us something I thought was lost forever," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Barbara, still teary-eyed, hugged him back. "I'm so glad I could help, Charles. Your mom is amazing." Charles nodded, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and love for the girl who had brought so much light into their lives. "You are amazing too, Barbara. And I want you to know that this is your home now. You are a part of our family." The young girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise and happiness. "Really? You mean it?" she asked, her voice trembling with hope. "Really," Charles confirmed, his voice firm and filled with conviction. "We belong together." As they left Sandra's room, hand in hand, Mary followed, her heart warmed by the sight of the newfound family. The mansion, which had once been a place of sorrow and isolation, now brimmed with the promise of new beginnings and shared love. The power of music, the strength of their bonds, and the resilience of their spirits had shown them that even in the darkest times, there was always a way to find the light. In the days that followed, the bond between Charles, Barbara, and Sandra grew stronger. They spent their evenings together, sharing stories, playing music, and creating new memories. Barbara's presence brought a sense of vitality and joy that had been missing for so long. And though Sandra's moments of clarity were fleeting, each one was cherished and celebrated. Charles began the legal process to officially adopt Barbara, his heart filled with hope and determination. He knew it would not be easy, but with Mary by his side and the love of his new family, he felt ready to face any challenge. The mansion, once a symbol of loss, had become a haven of hope and healing. And as they moved forward, bound by the power of music and the love they shared, they knew that together they could overcome anything. With happiness for what had happened and sadness for the brevity of that clarity, Charles turned to Barbara, who watched everything with pride for what she had managed to do. Extending his hand and with a voice choked with emotion, he said, "Let's go for a walk in the forest, Barbara. We need some fresh air." The girl, wiping her own tears, nodded. Walking side by side under the canopy of trees, the silence between them was filled with the sound of their footsteps on the earth. It was a comfortable silence, a space to process the tumultuous emotions that the day had brought. Yet, driven by his gratitude, Charles broke the silence, his voice still laden with emotions. "You did something amazing today, Barbara. I don't know how to thank you for giving me that moment with my mother." Barbara, holding Charles's hand tightly, smiled shyly. "I just wanted to help," she said simply, "but I was happy too. Seeing you two like that was beautiful. I'm glad I could do it. You looked so happy." Charles looked at Barbara with a smile that radiated his happiness. The strength of the moment shared with his mother was still very alive in his heart, reinforcing a decision he had made, one that would change their lives forever. "Barbara," he began, drawing the girl's attention with the tender seriousness in his voice, "I've been thinking a lot about us and how you came into my life in such an unexpected way, and all of this has given me an idea that I wanted to see if you like." Barbara, curious and a bit anxious, looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "What idea is that, Charles?" she asked, her expression reflecting a mix of excitement and slight concern. Charles stopped, turning to face her directly, wanting her to see the sincerity and love in his eyes. "Barbara, how would you feel if I adopted you? If you officially became my daughter?" Barbara's reaction was immediate and intense. Her eyes widened with surprise, and then quickly they filled with a sparkle of pure joy. "Really? You want to be my new daddy?" She could barely contain her excitement, a broad smile spreading across her face. Charles nodded, tears of joy welling up in his eyes. "Yes, Barbara, I want you to be my daughter. I want to give you a home, a family, and all the love you deserve." Barbara threw her arms around Charles, hugging him tightly. "Yes, yes, I would love that," she exclaimed, her voice filled with happiness. "I've always wanted a family." Charles hugged her back, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. "We are a family now, Barbara, and we'll take care of each other no matter what." As they continued their walk, the forest around them seemed to echo their joy, the rustling leaves and chirping birds creating a symphony of celebration. They talked about their future together, making plans and sharing dreams, the bond between them growing stronger with each step. When they returned to the mansion, the weight of the day's emotions had given way to a sense of peace and anticipation for the future. Charles knew that there would be challenges ahead, but with Barbara by his side, he felt ready to face anything. The mansion, once a place of sorrow and isolation, had become a beacon of hope and new beginnings. In the days that followed, Charles began the legal process to adopt Barbara, his heart filled with hope and determination. They spent their evenings together, sharing stories, playing music, and creating new memories. Barbara's presence continued to bring a sense of vitality and joy that had been missing for so long. And though Sandra's moments of clarity were fleeting, each one was cherished and celebrated. The power of music, the strength of their bonds, and the resilience of their spirits had shown them that even in the darkest times, there was always a way to find the light. Together they faced the future with courage and love, ready to create a life filled with happiness and warmth. The mansion, once a symbol of loss, had transformed into a home of love, where the past and present intertwined in a beautiful harmony, guiding them toward a brighter tomorrow. "Yes, seriously," Charles replied, his own smile mirroring hers. "I would love that, Barbara. You're already a part of my family and my heart, but I want it to be official for the whole world to know." With a cry of joy, Barbara leaped into Charles, hugging him with all the strength she had. "I would love that, Charles. Being a princess and living in the castle, it's going to be amazing to have a daddy again," she exclaimed, her voice filled with happiness and anticipation for the future that was now unfolding before her. As they continued their walk through the forest, a new bond formed between them, both feeling a lightness and hope they hadn't known in a long time. For Charles, the decision to adopt Barbara was a step toward a future full of possibilities and love. For Barbara, it was the promise of a home and a family, something she had longed for since losing her own. United by music, fate, and now a promise of adoption, they returned to the mansion, ready to start a new chapter of their lives together. In a world where hope often seems fragile, ready to be extinguished by hardships, the story of Barbara and Charles serves as a reminder of the transformative power of love, determination, and compassion. In the weeks following that unforgettable day, when the promise of a new family was made, Charles did everything in his power to make Barbara's adoption official. The speed with which everything happened was a testament not only to his determination but also to how right this decision was for both of them. Barbara, now officially part of the family, began to live under the love and care of Charles and, surprisingly, even Mary. The mansion, once quiet and lonely, now vibrated with the joy and energy of the young girl. Her desire to learn and her sharp intelligence brought constant pride to Charles. And unexpectedly, even Mary found a new purpose in supporting the girl in her studies and discoveries. Barbara's musical moments with Sandra, though brief, became a source of comfort and joy for everyone in the mansion. These moments of clarity for Sandra, albeit fleeting, were a small healing for the wounds left by the advancement of her disease. For Charles, they were a sign that despite the distance imposed by Alzheimer's, true love can never be destroyed. Thus, the days at the mansion were no longer the same. They were days of learning, music, shared laughter, and quiet moments of silent gratitude. Charles, Barbara, Mary, and even Sandra in her moments of lucidity formed a family united not only by blood but by heart. In the end, their story is a wonderful example that even in the most unexpected circumstances, family can be found and formed. The adoption of Barbara was not only her salvation but also Charles's, bringing new life to all of them. They proved that even in the face of adversity, it is possible to find happiness, love, and a sense of belonging. In that mansion, now filled with love and joy, each day was a celebration of life, brought about by the strength of love and the beauty of forming a family. If you've enjoyed this tale, please show your appreciation by hitting the like button and becoming part of our community by subscribing to the channel. Your encouragement motivates us to keep delivering exciting stories nearly every day. Make sure you don't miss the next incredible story currently displayed on your screen. We deeply appreciate your support. See you soon. As we come to the end of this heartwarming story of a rich man who found a lost girl in the forest and took her to his mother's house, who has a disability, we hope you've been touched by the incredible journey of Charles, Barbara, and Sandra. This tale reminds us of the transformative power of love, music, and compassion, and how family can be formed in the most unexpected ways. We'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from this story? What will you bring into practice in your own life? Please share one thing you've learned and how you plan to implement it in the comments below. If you liked this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep bringing you more amazing stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.